All right, welcome everyone. I'm Mark Krigo. I'm one of the moderators of Waters of Mormon, and tonight we have a very special event that Mormon Stories is sponsoring with us, and that is to interview Dan Wotherspoon and celebrate 8 years of Mormon Matters. And for us in Waters of Mormon and for many of the communities in our faith journey, Waters of Mormon celebrates Dan Wotherspoon along with Mormon Stories and everyone else for the work that he's done, for the ability that he has to be able to interview with his unique style. And with that, I'll turn the time over to our host, John DeLynn.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. And this is actually a joint production of Mormon Stories Podcast and Mormon Matters Podcast. It is March 24th, 2019. I'm John DeLynn, and I could not be more pleased to be recording this episode in front of a live audience at the Sons of Utah Pioneers building in, was this East Mill Creek, Utah, on a very special evening. Tonight, we are honoring 8 years of Mormon Matters Podcast, a podcast originated in its most notable form from Dr. Dan Wotherspoon. And so tonight we are here for many reasons. We're here to reflect on the history of Mormon Matters Podcast. So we're going to be reflecting a bit back on Dan's life, just for those of you who are brand new, and learning about Dan and Mormon Matters Podcast for the first time. And there will be a few of you who are. We'll briefly touch on Dan's life. We'll talk about the origins of Mormon Matters Podcast. We'll talk about its evolution, and then we'll also talk about kind of where Dan and his mission and Mormon Matters have arrived in 2019. And then Dan has some very exciting announcements to make about the future, his future, and a new project that he is very excited to announce along with others. So we're just very pleased. We're so thankful to everyone who's taken time out of their Sunday evening here to come and to celebrate Dan. Dan is worthy of our celebration, and he's worthy of the honor of your attendance. So thank you for coming. And we know that there are thousands and thousands of people, if not more, who would be joining us if they could. And we're very grateful for those of you who are able to join us through the live stream. We would welcome your questions and comments and expressions of gratitude for what Dan has meant to you. We'd welcome that if you want to share on the live stream. And for anyone who's joining us through the MP3s, through YouTube later, or on the Facebook Live channel later, we're welcoming everyone who's willing to join with us tonight in this celebration. And again, this will be shared both on Mormon Matters and Mormon Stories podcasts. So without any further ado, would all of you please join me in giving a big, warm round of applause to our special guest for tonight, Dan Wotherspoon. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming to the embarrassing titled show.
All right, Dan. Well, this isn't the first time we've done a little episode or two together.
We have.
We kind of go way back. But to begin, there are going to be people. Well, let me just say, did you want to make your announcement at the end, or did you want to make your announcement at the beginning?
We were planning at the end. I was just going to go down the list that you had put on the thing.
Okay. All right. So I'll do my best to stick to that stuff, but interviews are often as much an art form as they are a science for me, but there's no intentional curveballs. Okay. For those who, one of the things about our role is that there are always people just sort of in different phases of their journey, and you like to use the word journey. You've used that for many, many years, and I think I probably got that term from you. But there are going to be people who don't know you, And for those who don't know, Mormon Matters Podcast is one of the most successful and longest running podcasts in the history of Mormonism. It was started in 2011 by Dan. It actually had a few episodes before that. Originally, when I started it, originally Mormon Matters was a blog.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to turn it into kind of a weekly topical show to discuss just different current events. And we did a few dozen episodes on that. But when Dan parted ways with Sunstone, and when I saw that there was a real need to help amplify Dan's voice, I invited Dan to start a podcast, and he took over Mormon Matters. And since then, he's had, 400 or 500 episodes? How many episodes?
It's number 540 I just posted.
Yeah.
And so I think I began with number 22. So 520.
So over 500 episodes.
Yeah.
And just as the primer for those who don't know, Mormon Matters Podcast has always striven under Dan's leadership to explore constructive ways to engage Mormonism, to amplify one's spirituality, one's community, one's personal development. And that's kind of how I interpret what Dan has stood for. And he's kind of a giant in the Mormon podcasting field. So that's what we're going to be celebrating tonight for those who have never heard of Dan. But to go a little bit back, Dan, for those who don't know much about you, give us a few-minute version of kind of your story, just to let people know what you did before you started the podcast.
Okay, I guess I grew up in California, Sacramento, and then San Diego. Starting around the age 17, I felt the pressure for the mission. It was coming up pretty soon, and I'd always been sort of the kid who, was, everyone knew me, everybody liked me, ego says everyone just loved me. You get the moms who come up to you, thank you for being such a good example for my son, my 12-year-old deacon or whatever. And yet, somehow or other, that didn't seem like a good thing at all. And I don't know what came first, but I began to party a little bit. And as a junior in high school, partied a lot more as a senior in high school. Basically, by the time I was 19, nobody thought that I was mission material. A few more years of that really led me into some big, dark areas. And a little bit of time in jail, a little bit of time contemplating suicide. And I guess I was 23 in a few months. Actually, one of my cousins is here. But an aunt and uncle of mine invited me to live with their family in Mapleton, Utah, which was just, 15, 18 minutes from Provo, where I was living. And it helped me get some distance from the party lifestyle. And it let me just sort of have some breathing room. And so a year in the home, and this is my cousin Ben over here with his parents. And Ben was 4 years younger than me, I think. And then all the way down to maybe age 4 or 5. And it was just such a lovely experience, just being in the home. Their dad was the bishop. They just were fun. They lived the gospel, just in a really relaxed and a beautiful way. And, of course, I love these guys, and it was fun. But ultimately, I read the Book of Mormon. Again, probably I didn't read it straight through ever before, but I thought I knew the Book of Mormon. And in that process, it has changed me. I mean, from this despair of kind of selling all my gifts, for cocaine and various other things, just those, whether they're real people or not, those sons of Messiah and Alma the Younger were the key that I needed to just say, wow, maybe I can turn this around. Maybe I can be a person of worth again. So I'll never deny what happened in me. Certainly at the time I thought they were historical figures. I'm still open to that possibility. But somehow or other they operated me on that deep archetypal level of a journey. And within 8 or 9 months of that, I decided to go on a mission, went to Seattle, Seattle. I met my wife, Lori. Everybody ought to say hi to Lori. She's here. The wind beneath my wings. I don't know what better thing, but she's awesome. She's put up with me and a crazy journey. Our daughter Hope and her husband Ben are also right there. So, and we have a son named Alex who's a snowmobile guide outside of Vail. So he's out there. But we went on a mission. We met Laura on a mission. We just sort of were friends in our first zone. We were right downtown Seattle, so we got to go to the Space Needle and all the fun things. And I'm taking too long, aren't I? But
Nope.
They asked us to head up the reunions after we were both home, and a couple of the people, Shauna in the back there, had the reunions before us, and so she handed it off to us, and we ended up getting married even before the first reunion was executed. So it was just one of those things we hit it off, and of course then the first 15 years of marriage were really, really hard. But anyway, we've had a great time. We just celebrated our 33rd anniversary, and our daughter and Ben, they're third. So we're exactly 30 years apart. They did not plan that. It was just the most available date in the spring break for them. So anyway, so coming back from a mission, I taught 2.5 years at the MTC. They recruited me really hard for CES, seminaries and institutes. As I got through that program, and they were basically saying, let's go, I just realized that I wasn't built to teach teenagers. Just you either have it or not. And they were very upfront with me about that. So I decided to just pursue my deep, truth was supposed to entertain people, right? But it doesn't work with teenagers. So, I decided to get a master's degree. So my bachelor's is in philosophy and classical civ. So Greek, Latin, mythology, all that stuff is my minor. Then I went and got a master's at Arizona State in religious studies, and then a doctorate at Claremont in 1996 on religion, but it's the philosophy of religion and theology emphasis. So that's my training. And the beautiful thing about all that was, certainly my faith crisis began, I would say, exactly 30 years ago, a month or two ago. Because that's the first time that, when I was a kid and I just didn't want to grow up. That's where my acting out was. That's why I didn't want to go on a mission. I didn't want to have to deliver, in terms of all the expectations and whatnot. But what was it? Where was I? So the faith crisis happened a little bit in grad school. But Lori and I stayed really active in our wards there. We were in a great ward at Arizona State. We had one really bad ward in Upland, California that I don't think we could name a person. Nobody talked to us. It was just weird. So as soon as our lease was up, then we ended up in San Dimas, California, Bill and Ted. And we had a great years, and that was where I was, finishing up. I was getting ready to write my dissertation. Then I wrote a dissertation on stuff that I loved in Mormonism. It's basically, what is it in Mormonism that leads to us to have an affirming ecological worldview, sustainability, and whatnot. But then the crisis got worse when I didn't get a job. So that was everything's supposed to work out, and it didn't. And so pretty soon, in one round of, I was teaching adjunct. It was easy to get adjunct work. But it got harder and harder with each cycle of sending out your apps. And, you're looking up the place on the map, and you're imagining life there and all these kinds of things. And then, you don't get an interview even or something. So I began to just really blame my Mormonism and how Mormon, a lot of my presentations had been at Sunstone and whatnot. And just, book reviews and everything that I had done was really quite Mormon. So I had of kind of, sort of being okay within Mormonism, I had a couple of bad years where I wanted to just call Mormonism them, versus me or we, I just wanted to, I kind of wanted to, and everybody was just, they don't know a thing, and they're testifying to me. that kind of stuff, about what I should do. And so it was really kind of hard, but it was a wonderful final that I had to go to, I think, in order to be ready and as soon as I figured out I can do Mormonism again. I can do it. I can be myself there. I can engage with people without the initial thing being you're an idiot, or you don't know anything. You don't know your own faith. You haven't thought through the history or the beliefs. And as soon as I got that, I got a gig called Sunstone. I was invited to apply for that, and I served at Sunstone from the beginning of 2001 till August 2008. So it's kind of interesting, the 8 years of Mormon Matters, and I'm stepping into something new. I had basically 8 years at Sunstone, so that kind of feels kind of nice for me to, you do something, it runs its course, and you're ready for something next. So Sunstone was a wonderful opportunity. That's where I got to meet so many of my guests. The nice thing, I had a good Rolodex. I also have Kurt Bench here. I'm not supposed to out him as being at this apostate thing. Yeah, sorry. My good friend here, I worked with him.
This is not an apostate thing.
Yeah, I know. Well, it might be to some people. So, but I got to meet a ton of, Kurt runs Benchmark Books. So I worked there for 6 years. Well, he says I was employed there. I didn't actually work, but that's his joke. But I got to meet a ton of people. So through that and through Sunstone, I kind of had a good Rolodex when this came along. So after Sunstone, it was tough. I went to work for another nonprofit. It hit right 2008. Remember when I left? That wasn't a good time to leave when you're going to nonprofits and the real estate market crashes. So I had a couple of really lean years, and then John had been on the board of Sunstone the last couple of years that I was there, and he offered me the chance to the Mormon Matters gig.
Yeah,
I'm grateful. Very grateful.
Well, I remember hearing, I don't know how the conversation happened, but it was seemed like you were weeks or even days away from accepting a job, as a janitor or for a bookstore. Some job.
That would have been terrible.
Not even a quality bookstore, just some old bookstore. I don't know what the job was.
I remember that. I remember I was looking in quite different spaces than I was.
Spaces that would not in any way utilize your talents and your gifts.
Like that.
And I just remember feeling there's no way that this shining, inspiring, brilliant light can just fade away. So I said, we have to create something for Dan. And so
you had a big platform already. So
I called you and said, hey, what do you think? What do you remember about that?
Well, the one thing I remember is when you were in your information tech program before you did your doctorate in psychology, John had asked Natasha Helfer Parker and I. We were on the board of Open Stories Foundation, the umbrella organization, and he had asked us to do some interviews to relieve some of the pressure on him to produce something every week. So I did about 4 or 5 there, and I think you probably got the idea of offering me this because of that.
Yeah.
So I did Richard Dutcher and Dan Peterson and just some of my connections.
Yeah, Daniel Peterson and Richard Dutcher were 2 very important interviews that you did. Yeah. So what did you think when, do you remember what you thought or what you felt when you contemplated having your own podcast? Did you have any vision of what that might be like?
Well, because of your podcast, I certainly did. But as far as, running it myself and having to, I didn't know the tech end of it. How many weeks did I still call you on certain steps and whatnot? But no, it honestly, it fit like a glove as soon as I started doing it, I think. And at first, like you were saying, John, we did one on the BYU crisis, or we did some of these really topical, ones. But as soon as there wasn't really anything super interesting in the Mormon world, that we got to say, let's do a deep dive on this, and let's do a deep dive on this, and let's broaden our, our conversation on this or that. And so that really became what I think Mormon Matters evolved into. Certainly, I'd say at least half of my shows are conceived out of reacting to something in Mormonism, or just it's time to revisit, time to, offer that.
So when you first envisioned doing a podcast, doing Mormon Matters, did you have a vision for what role you might play? What your mission or purpose would be?
No, just be myself and share. I think again, that's your gig. It's honestly, you guys, I am not ambitious, and it's my wife does not like that about me. But I just am grateful. Again, he really breathed life into. It gave me a chance to draw on all my scholarship, and the way I began to frame religion during all those years of studying religion really have helped me in how I frame Mormonism. So by learning about other religions, I'm a lot kinder to my own because I see that, they're beautiful and wonderful, and every one of them, can elevate people, but every one of them's messed up too, And so Randy Paul, my good friend that a lot of you have met on the show or you've heard me talk about, it was him that at one point just said, "Why will you cut everybody else slack and not yours?" Because they're mine. It's like, my parents are the worst in the world, not yours, and everybody just, Hope's laughing really hard over there. But, and it just, I was so grateful to have that background. And I think that's what I speak from here, right? It's like, hey, I'm not afraid of us in Mormonism having a weird history. And I know there's personalities everywhere you go. And yet somehow I'm just grounded in, what religion is, not what a particular church and an institutional kind of stuff does.
So a personal story between us that for me feels poignant here. Okay. I started Mormon Stories in 2005 and was teaching Elders Quorum from 2004 to probably 2006-ish, 2 or 3 years, trying to give these progressive, liberal, inspiring, controversial kind of lessons in Elders Quorum. And after a while, I wore out, and my bishop, people were complaining to my bishop, and I just started to feel like I just couldn't make Mormonism work. So there's a year there where kind of our family just went inactive from the church, probably 2006 to 2007. And then when I came back, at the time, I just felt kind of this darkness. I felt like, I don't know that I can be a good human without the church. I don't feel as inspired as I used to. It feels like the light's gone out of our lives. Will I be able to raise good kids? Like, after a year of it, I just felt this huge void. So in 2007, I'm like, no, this can be done. You can stay in the church and you can make it work. And I was so inspired by this idea that I created the StayLDS website, and within a very short period of time, I wrote like a 60-page kind of manual for how to stay in the church. And I remember on one of our trips or something, kind of sharing with you that I'd kind of cracked the code, that I had written the book on staying in the church, had it all figured out, and had published it. Do you remember your reaction, either your thoughts or what you actually said?
I don't remember specifically, but a lot of people come to me, I figured, this out, and yet they're not in your case. I mean, you're what, 10, 12 years younger than me? I'm turning 60 this year.
I'm 49.
Yeah, so I'll get these 22-year-olds, telling me that they're already Fowler stage 5.
They're stage 5.
Yeah, or something. And I'm going, well, I think it's not something you can think your way into. It's, it's a kind of a living thing. And I said, that's great. I really like that piece, and it has lots of good advice, but crack the code and mean and you're in your soul. I'm not quite. I probably said something bad. But you tell me what I said.
Yeah, no, I
felt hope wasn't
what
a jerk.
I perceived was at the time. It was sort of like an emotional pat on the head, like, "Oh, John, good luck, and thank you for your little contribution."
Oh, gee.
You didn't say those words, right?
Yeah.
But that was how and I'm like, "Oh, Dan's so smug," And but what you were basically saying is you're just starting. I mean, what I felt like you were communicating to me is this is an intense, complex, painful, long journey. And you're not going to crack the code in 6 months with the blog post. This is something you're going to have to feel and live, and there's a lot of pain and complexity and even suffering in the process of evolving and growing on this journey. And I mean, of course, we saw, what happened to me, and you were right. Like it is. So when I thought about what was Mormon Matters, when I called you, it was like how to stay, a podcast on how to stay, how to provide for Mormons in 2011, which is when we started, a model from the best out there living, a model for how to do it. Mm-hmm. Now, did you not conceive of it that way?
I guess so. Because Sunstone, people responded well to my leadership at Sunstone. So I knew that I was onto something. And the nice
thing... Talk about your role as kind of a shadow stake president. I remember...
What I really thought when I took over Sunstone, that I was going to produce a magazine. And in many ways, I was going to look at 50 East North Temple, to say, hey, we got the code over here. You guys should be listening to us. And so certainly I did edit a magazine and I did put together conferences, but right out of the bat, this is before Facebook, right? 2001 is before Facebook. Or
2011?
No, 2001 when I started Sunstone. Yeah. I think there was that LDS listserv, you know.
It was before blogs.
Yeah.
It was before podcasts. Before Facebook.
Phone call after phone call after phone call with the questions that, a lot of the audience that John's podcast and mine, meet. But I started to say, wow, this feels more like a pastor sort of thing. People just wanting advice, and maybe I'd been on the trail a bit longer, than them. That's, I guess, the only way that, somehow all of ours will have our own flavor, but we have to get through the same sort of changes in authority from external authority to, growing into our own and feeling confident within ourselves and feeling connected and all that good stuff with something deeper than, what our heads could do. And so, it became a pastoral thing, and it just became so clear to me that this is what I'm made for rather than being an academic. It was like, and even when I was applying for jobs, I was more interested in the ones that were at junior colleges or just four-year colleges because I just wanted people to love their own voice, the contribution that they could make and stuff. So it was more, that was me anyway, rather than wanting to be an expert in some field and advise grad students and do all that stuff. So it just became very clear to me that I wrote a little reflection for the 35th anniversary of Sunstone about, I got one of the few paid pastor jobs in Mormonism through Sunstone. And so that's really what it was. It just was... and I within a few months, I never thought twice about the church over in, the headquarters because it just wasn't important. So is that kind of your fishing
Yeah. So talk about what your strategy and approach started out as, and then how it evolved as a podcaster. What did you try and do, and how did you think about topic selection, format, and even participants? How did you think about all that?
At first, I was honoring your format, which was panel discussion. Now, you generally had the same panel, with just a few pieces moving out, but I always tried to get a panel together. And so format was a discussion among other people with me just trying to be, ringleader. Oh, I haven't heard from you in a while. I've got so many people in this room who have been on my podcast. I love it. So my podcast, the Mormon Matters Podcast, an Open Stories Foundation production. And so that was kind of set for me. But really, it was just what deserves a deep dive. What's in the air right now that people are wrestling with? And then, my master's thesis, you guys, a lot of you have probably seen some of my stuff on ritual and ritual empowerment. And even though rituals are weird, and repetitive and stylistic and all these different ways, there's a real sense to it, which is to get you out of, your monkey mind and all those kinds of things. And so I remember doing one on that really early on. I remember doing one on patriarchal blessings that I think is probably...
Was that with Bushman?
With Richard Bushman, along with Jared Anderson. And I'll tell you, that was transformative to me. And it actually, can I share a little bit? It was transformative for me in terms of even hearing general authorities today, because he said that one of the things as a patriarch, the hesitation is for you to edit what you're feeling, coming through. And he says, it's a lot harder for me to give one to my grandchildren than it is to somebody I barely just meet, only know on the city, because he goes, I have so much I want for them, so it's me that wants this to be coming through me. And he said that he just had to learn to just trust and just speak. And so, and he said that they had gotten some training after his second or third year that said, don't be afraid to speak in the prophetic mode. And as he explained how patriarchal blessings went, it was like, I will get very strong impressions, but it's my language, it's my framing, it's my, I put the words to what I'm feeling. And my grandfather was a patriarch as well, and so he would sometimes share a little bit. I was 16 through 18 years living in his house when he was a patriarch. And he says, so for instance, the strong impression about this person's powerful spirit, will come in valiancy in the pre-earth life to some patriarchs, versus just others would say this. And those that are really big in the valiancy in the pre-earth life will start to do the expansions on, you were a general, you were this, all these kinds of things. And he says that, but he says at least it may come to them that way, but he says, for me, I believe I'm getting the same insight as they would, but they put it in their own language and rhetorical flourishes. And so I thought about it. Do you guys remember a few years ago in Arizona when Jeff Holland kind of was speaking, and it was like about, hey, this life isn't easy. It's a tough road. And to me, it was actually a terrific talk, but there were a few minutes in there where he started, I get so mad at people leave this church. I can't even imagine, anyone who would want to leave it, what kind of, what was it, patty cake, something or other.
Taffy pull.
Yeah, or something like that. And of course, at first, because everybody was only picking out those 2 or 3 minutes from the talk, so finally I listened to the whole talk. I go, this guy's got something going on. And I can just tell that he's not speaking from the script. He didn't come there planning to do it. He just let himself go. And I said to myself, I really like that, that he felt strong enough to just say it. And, and it was us who were making him an offender, for a word. And so whenever weird language, I certainly didn't enjoy Satan's victory, or any of that we've kind of heard if certain things happen or said. But anyway, it just helps me kind of honor the intent, behind it. There's something that prompts. And if I can try to find that and not have to deal with all the exact wording and make, but of course the rhetoric at church, at least with many people, is these are the exact words, instead of the message, the sense that this would be something to talk about. So that's been helpful. So the show has really taught me a ton of things. And I don't know why I went on that long on that one, but I just wanted to say that I'm just...
It's your prophetic voice.
Well, and, sometimes I will say things on there, I go, damn, that was good, and it's like, where did it come from? Because it's just really strange. And so nowadays, all those are little notes because I'm writing a book. I should have it out in September about, it was about this, how to stay in the church and feel connected when you're in these spaces. So But it's just neat. I don't. You were asking about if I had any plans beyond that.
No.
Really.
No,
And I usually would choose by either things I noticed or people's suggestions, is I would say how I decided to do deep dives. But I refused to do one on the mall, and I've refused to do one on tithing.
Why?
They're just minefields. I couldn't figure out a way to really have an open-hearted discussion about either of those, because one's so personal, tithing, and the other one is just like, that's just the organization the institution doing its thing, deciding to protect their, anyway, there wasn't any prophetic thing that I couldn't find any fire underneath that particular choice. Let's put it that way. So I would stay away from some things like that.
So you talked about, for example, ritual. What are some of the main themes that you feel like you've covered, and what are, do you have any? This is the question I like least. Well, the question I hate most is, why don't you drink alcohol, for me personally, and the second question I hate most is, what's my favorite podcast episode? Mm-hmm. So, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. Do you have any episodes that stand out for you, or just ones you feel like highlighting today?
I didn't know we were going to do this, but theme-wise, certainly faith journeys. So I'll tell one thing that happened. So at first, panel, just you guys do all the talking, and maybe I'll give you a couple of hints at what I'm thinking. Have you guys noticed the last few years? It's like, I'm going to lay it out there for you. So somehow or other, I either gained more confidence in my voice, or enough people, said, hey, do monologue episodes, or we like it when you weigh in and stuff. So things went that direction. And so where I'm centered in my life, well, let me just tell you quickly, during the worst of the time when I wasn't getting jobs, that part where I was really down on Mormonism, I got put next to James Fowler, the author of Stages of Faith on a Plane. So this might be one of those like purely grace moments. And I'm feeling a little lousy about it. And as soon as he shakes his hand and he introduces himself and I introduce myself back, he goes, Mormonism, have you ever heard of Sunstone? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, I've spoken there a couple times. And so he was friends with Peggy Stack, who, had put him on in all these things. And he had reminded me that I'd actually read his book, Stages of Faith, back in 1988, probably fall of 88. And I thought I was there, I figured I was stage 5. I had cracked the code. I hadn't even begun. And so I read his book. I read his next book. I read all of his books. And then I did nothing but read faith journey literature for 3 years. So I would say faith journeys, normalizing it, encouraging people on it. You got to go through. You can't go around, and you have to involve your whole soul and not just your mind, because we usually start with our heads, right? Our faith journeys start by mismatches that we notice, but it's really soul work that a faith journey requires. So I was planning to go into some of that stuff later. So. And
we will.
Yeah, so I don't know anywhere there's that. But, certainly I thought we did nice primers on Easter and Christmas. I tend to put those up every year. Let's look at actually the scriptures. What do they say? I have Phil McLemore here that I'm going to start putting the one that we did up. Well, actually, I'll refer to him from my new podcast, hint, to old ones. But Phil added the mystical interpretation of the Christmas story to it. But I thought we did a good job with those things. I'll tell you the one that we did on covenants. So Mark Kriego over here, my good friend, we did one recently on the covenant path. But I think Joe Stanford, you're here. Yeah, there. Joe suggested that we do one on covenanting in general. And so we called it The Living Nature of Mormon Covenants. And we really addressed what these two guys, we have a friend who calls it being covenanting by ambush. When you go to the temple for the first time, you don't really know what to get, and yet you make a covenant. And a lot of times it's like you feel the pressure of your family and everything going on there. And so we just really wrestled with, of course, your understanding of your covenant is going to change as your understanding of everything else changes. And yet a lot of people feel like trapped with, an 18-year-old or a 22-year-old's vision of what a promise, a relational promise with God's all about. And so I really thought that was one of the important ones, and I think I've, done encore episodes of those. Do you want more of these?
Yeah, just a sampling.
I don't know, because I was hoping that we'd be done by 9, and I wanted at least 45 minutes for these guys. So I feel like I'm going on too much.
We're going till 10. What are you talking about?
I see 3 people moving and leaving.
No, you can stop now. But any other episodes that come to mind is like
I should have looked.
Let me do this. Just in the audience, if 5 or 10 of you just say an episode or a person interviewed that really sticks out to you, and I'll repeat it.
Todd.
A reason for the hope that is in me, 259.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember.
Talk about that one.
I don't remember what I said, but it was just me musing. I believe it was prompted by what I had spoken on in the Portland, Oregon, with a Sunstone Northwest, right? So I basically just into the microphone did what I'd shared there, and it was just what are the pillars of my faith? I think, right, and how I hold those things. Some of my story was in that too. Okay, thank you.
Others?
Todd. Now I want to know. Todd and his wife came from Colorado. In some ways to
someone else
be
came
here,
from
so that was really
California.
Cool.
There's several people
Jeff
that
here came from the Bay Area. Really surprised to have him. So
others just want an episode or a topic or an interviewee.
Leslie.
I really like the faith, belief, and the expectation to know.
Yeah.
Faith, belief, and the expectation to know.
Yeah.
Since we don't have a microphone.
Yeah.
Do you want to respond?
Well, I mean, that's the big one, right? The church seems to be on this kick that you should have certainty. And certainly the ritual of bearing testimony is to claim that you know. And so I know I had Jeff Burton, and I'm trying to think who else I had on there. Francis Menlove, right, whose book I edited. Yeah, and we talked about what faith is versus what belief is and stuff. And I don't know if I went into Alma 32. For the book that's going to come out, I have a little interlude chapter where I'm doing a lot with Alma 32, that truth is, when you give place to the word and you plant the seed, it's more what happens in you rather than the truth claim itself, right? Isn't that what he says? You plant it and you see what grows, see if it swells, see if it does this. And at a certain point, the only thing that we can say about anything true is what has done in us. What has emerged, what has been the fruit. And that's where it says, then you can know. But to say a proposition about Jesus Christ or about what's in the next life and all these things are true, that's impossible without experiential, kind of knowing. So thank you for reminding me of that one, because that's, to me, so core.
Let's do a few more. Two lost sons are growing in God.
My
Dan?
partner over there, Phil McLemore. So, prodigal story reading in such a richer way. I'd certainly heard that the prodigal story had been called the story of the 2 lost sons. In the past, I'd picked that up through my studies and whatnot. But Phil really added a beautiful mystical reading to that. But, to me, the one that we call the prodigal is actually the one who's better off, because he finally hit rock bottom, right? Then you kind of say, and to have God's response just be that so beautiful, but yet God's response is the same thing to the elder brother. Man, you're lost. You can't even see the big picture here. You and your he doesn't call him in his self-righteousness or I'm the good one. I did all the right things, but he says, hey, you get it all too, kind of thing. Nothing's lost because your brother came home and we're celebrating him. This is an abundant universe. This is a feast. Everybody's invited to the feast of God. So I love that one. And then what was the other one we did on that? We did the prodigal son and something else. What was the title of it? The 2 lost sons and Okay.
What I liked was your, if I remember well, it was the faith stages that you.
Oh, yeah, those are Phil's.
Stages of faith.
Again, this guy's real part, and I'll introduce something about him later. But I don't know if you know, he looked at the scriptures and he says there's 5 relationships described between God and humans there. One is the parent-child, right? One is the steward and the master. So, I'm a steward in the master's vineyard. Then there's the teacher or the rabbi and the disciple. And that's the sticky one. That's the one where when you're in that relationship, the expectation is what? You're going to grow to become the teacher one day, right? You're going to do the disciplines, disciple. You're going to do the disciplines that one day you've become the teacher. And then the next 2 are friend to friend. God calls us our friends, that beautiful ease with each other, the open sharing. What's in my heart, come on and grab it, You can look right in here because I know that we're so solid. I know that I'm loved and there's nothing in here that I need to hide from you. And then, of course, the last one is beloved, the beloved status, where we're the bridegroom. He's the bridegroom and we're the bride, and we unite in fullness. Anyways, it's gorgeous stuff. So thanks. Let's stop on favorite podcast. But I'm glad I got to share that again. And Phil, you can tell me if I botched it.
One of the characteristics of Dan that I've noticed ever since I've known him is his uncanny memory. This guy has an amazing memory, and he just displayed a little bit of that.
Not as much as my wife thinks she has of things I've said in the past. That's uncanny, apparently. We love it.
Real quick, how have you handled... So over the years, from 2011 to 2019, 8 years... There have been some tough moments in Mormonism. We're going to stay talking about the modern church until kind of more towards the end. But let's just say Boyd K. Packer's talk about, why would a loving Heavenly Father do this to our LGBT brothers and sisters, or, excommunications of various people, or the September, the November 2015 policy. Lots of opportunities or moments of frustration or sadness or outrage. Over the years, I remember at least a few times connecting with you right as something really maybe discouraging from your perspective might have been shared in a general conference, or a policy had come down. How did you try and approach talking about some of those more challenging or controversial or delicate topics?
Number one, I was grateful I had a podcast.
Why is that?
Just because I got to process it with really smart, wonderful people. We did 7 hours on the November policy over 3 different chunks of podcasts. And, I started with John Rothal and Gustav Rothal and Carolyn Pearson. That was like right after the news. And they're just a couple of people that... sit in their Mormonism in a very comfortable way. They know themselves, they know their mind, and they feel confident that the connection with God. And then I did one that we sort of analyzed what could have been behind it, or something. And then I think I can't remember what the other one did. I know we did a third one right after it. So I'm just grateful to have that. Lori, Hope here, I don't know, Ben's seen a little bit of it. I lose my crap. I just get so frustrated because it's not so much, it comes almost from sadness, grief, that we have such richness and it's not being shared, it's not even being noticed. And, but when it is noticed, and this is what I've come, I think, more than a lot of, maybe in fact what led me to feel like I could write this book on, how to speak up at church and whatnot, is as soon as you offer it, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, we do believe that. Oh yeah, or and then it just kind of changes things at church, but I'll be really frustrated, and so what was it? We did. Karma here was here that day too. I think we had the whole lesson. It was supposed to be about John the Baptist, right? Just in the scriptures for this year, and we didn't even talk about it more than like John the Baptist was a forerunner for Jesus Christ. In what way is President Nelson a forerunner for God's? And the whole thing was just a rehearsal of that. And I'm just back there going, what's happening here? And finally, I just 6 or 7 minutes into it, I go, I'm missing the connection with John the Baptist here. And she goes, well, she repeated whatever that little thing was. And I go, I just got to say something. We do not give John the Baptist enough credit. And I went on for probably 3 or 4 minutes or something and just said some things about just because I want it so much for people to, just get into the scriptures and love them and think and know the context and all that stuff. So how do I handle it? I mean, I'll be mad. I'll be depressed, but it ultimately doesn't change what my job is in life, what all of our jobs in our life, right?
And I mean in the episode. So obviously podcasters have been excommunicated, right? Obviously, you can run afoul of church leadership, or just in a more benign sense, you can damage, your reputation with the people that you're trying to reach, or you can come across as not constructive or as a critic of the church. So how have you navigated in your podcast trying to walk that line of not being viewed as an enemy, of serving your audience, but also not running afoul, of the church or discipline or any of that?
I don't know that it's in my brain to do that. It's just who I am right now. I don't know. Does that sound arrogant? That I know how to talk, in such a way to avoid some of the extreme things. Hope, I want to say something. When you and Kate were first announced that you're both, on this path, Hope called me from college, and it was like, you okay with me saying they're sort of emotional? Are you going to be next? Are you on the line here? And I told her I don't think so. And, because I'm not a person that would ever embarrass the church. I'm an activist in my own way, but I'm more of a long vision person. And so I'll have my private eruptions, I'll have my sarcasm, I'll have my temper tantrums. But, I love this group. This is the group that I met God through. This is, I took all of Joseph Smith's, try it out for yourself, It was good. It was good for me. And I think I just got to where I don't, this is going to take longer, for the church to come around because this rhetoric or that rhetoric will be in there. But, my job's the same. Love whenever there's, hate or whatever you'd call, try to be large whenever smallness comes around. Try to, whenever you see pain, I want to be there and acknowledge it and heal it, or not heal it myself, but be in a position to let them, get the light to heal it for them, something. I don't know. Not my light, but the light.
I love it.
So does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
So
beautiful.